ever feel like you're your own worst enemy? When it comes to like achieving goals, I mean, you know what you should be doing, but something's always holding you back.
It's pretty common.
Yeah.
This book, The Power of Discipline, dives into that.
Okay.
Gets into the psychology of it. Turns out our brains, like they're wired to resist change.
Really?
Even when it's good change, positive change.
So it's not just me then, it's like a real thing.
Oh yeah, it's science. Like the status quo bias, that's our tendency to stick with what's familiar.
Right, even if it's not really working, you mean?
Exactly. Our brains kind of default to the path of least resistance. It's like we're on autopilot.
Okay, I can see that, sticking with the comfortable, even if, what if there's something better? But it's scary to change, right?
It is, and that's what the book gets into, ways to overcome that bias. Like setting small goals, achievable ones, that help you ease out of your comfort zone.
So you kind of train your brain to be okay with change instead of freaking out.
Exactly, and a big part of that is this thing called loss aversion. Have you heard of that?
Loss aversion? I don't think so.
So basically, it means we feel the pain of a loss way more intensely than the pleasure of, say, an equal gain.
Okay.
So we might cling to familiar habits, relationships, even jobs we hate.
Because we're afraid of the loss.
Right. Even if what we stand to gain is way better.
Okay, yeah. That makes sense, I guess. Like staying in a job you hate just because it's familiar.
Exactly. It's that sunk cost fallacy. And the book says we do this with habits too, not just big life stuff.
Oh, really?
We think, I've been doing this way for so long, but those habits, they could be holding us back.
So how do we break out of that then?
Well, the book suggests a shift in perspective.
Okay.
Instead of fixating on the outcome, focus on the systems and habits that'll get you there.
So like fall in love with the process, not just the end goal.
Yes. And the book talks about how to actually make those daily practices enjoyable.
Okay, now that I've got it here, how do we make ourselves actually crave the work?
Well, it's like Pavlov's dogs, remember them? They were trained to associate a bell with food.
Right. Classical conditioning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the book suggests pair a challenging task with something you enjoy. Maybe it's music, a snack, even a scent. Over time, your brain starts to link that good feeling with the task.
Tricking your brain, basically.
In a way, you're making those small daily efforts more appealing, more automatic.
So we're kind of rewiring our responses. I like it.
It's about working with your brain, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of effective strategies, the book also dives into Zen philosophy.
Oh, interesting.
Specifically, the Shaolin monks.
Those guys are like the ultimate masters of discipline, right?
Right. And one of their key principles is living in the present moment, like really being present.
That's something I think a lot of us struggle with.
Totally. But the book suggests that dwelling on the past or, worrying about the future, that can really hold you back.
It's like carrying around a backpack full of worries and what ifs.
Exactly. And it weighs you down.
Yeah.
By shifting your focus to right now, the present moment, that's where you find more clarity, more energy.
It's almost like those monks practicing martial arts. They're not thinking about their to-do list, right? They're just there in each move.
Exactly. And the book actually gives a step-by-step guide to practicing Zazen.
What's that?
It's a seated meditation technique.
Yeah.
And it helps you develop that present moment awareness.
So we can train our minds the way those monks train their bodies.
Precisely. And a big part of that is also connecting with your why, that deeper purpose.
Why are we doing any of this if we don't know why?
Exactly. And the book argues when you're connected to that why, even the hard stuff feels more manageable, like having a compass,
Keeps you on track even when things get tough.
Exactly. Speaking of tough, the book also has advice on dealing with negative emotions.
Okay, now this I'm curious about. Because most self-help stuff is all about think positive, but that's not always realistic, is it?
No, not at all. This book takes a different approach.
Okay, how so?
Instead of ignoring or suppressing negative emotions, it says use them to your advantage.
Really? Turn that frown upside down kind of thing.
Well, sort of. Let's say anger, for example. Instead of letting it eat you up, channel that energy into something productive.
So use anger as fuel to power through a tough task.
Exactly. Or envy, for instance. If you're feeling envious of someone else's success, use it as motivation. What did they do to get there? What can you learn from it?
So it's about reframing those negative emotions, not just wishing them away.
Exactly. The book gives strategies for harnessing all sorts of emotions. Anxiety, frustration, even boredom. and using them to your advantage.
That's wild. But what about when you're doing all the right things and it's still not working out how you plan? The book also mentions the Pareto principle, right? That 80-20 rule.
Yes. And that can feel discouraging, putting in all that effort for what feels like a small return.
Right.
But the book encourages us to see it as a tool.
How so?
If 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts, then figure out what that 20% is. What are the high-impact activities you should focus on?
So it's about being strategic, not just working hard for the sake of it.
Exactly. It's about working smarter. Learn to delegate, cut out unnecessary tasks.
Find the things that really move the needle.
Exactly.
So we've got to find that 20%. But then, even when you're focused on those high-impact things, don't you run the risk of burnout? Like, is it sustainable?
That is so key. And the book talks about that. Real self-discipline. It's not about pushing till you drop. It's about sustainability.
Okay, so it's not about being a robot then. There's room for rest in there.
Absolutely. The book actually emphasizes rest and relaxation.
Oh, wow, really?
Yeah, it's just as important as the hard work.
Okay. Makes sense. Even like those Shaolin monks. Take breaks, right? Meditate, recharge.
Exactly. The book even suggests scheduling relaxation time.
Wait, like putting it in your calendar? That's kind of funny, but also maybe brilliant?
It is. Treat it as essential, not a luxury.
I love that. Okay, so we've covered a lot. Any final thoughts from the book that we haven't touched on yet?
I think the biggest takeaway is self-discipline. It's not a finish line you cross. It's the journey itself.
It's those daily choices that add up over time.
Exactly. And you don't have to make some huge, drastic change overnight.
So it's not about becoming superhuman all at once.
Right. Start small.
Yeah.
Pick one area you want to work on, your morning routine maybe,
Yeah.
or how you handle stress.
And then just one tiny action each day.
Yes, like I'll meditate for 5 minutes. Not I'm going to become a Zen master by next week.
Because that just sets you up for failure, right?
Exactly. Small wins build momentum. That's the key.
I love it. So much to think about. Big thanks to our expert for breaking down the power of discipline.
My pleasure.
And to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. Remember, self-discipline is a journey, not a race. What small step will you take today? That's something to ponder.